I think that from the beginning of the Reagan administration, you saw a lot of clamping down in terms of content. Because with each administration, they get to nominate the people that they want to sit on the FCC. And the FCC, although it's not chartered as a censorship organization or operation, they do censor either directly or by inference or by threatening people's licenses. And so certain things just don't go on the air. And then during the Reagan administration, this was reinforced by this Meese Commission witch hunt that traveled the country for over a year, trying to find a link between pornography and violence. And at the end of this time, they could not find any, but they never published that finding. But they went around terrorizing people. It was just like, it was kind of like a sexual McCarthy hearing that moved from town to town. And it had certain overtones of fundamentalist Christian organizations. They were always there to support it when it came to town to put on its little show. And one of their star witnesses was Linda Lovelace, the girl from Deep Throat who had become a born-again Christian and was there testifying about the horrors of pornography. And that was like she was a star draw for when the thing came to town. They weren't really coming there to see Ed Meese, they were coming to see Linda.
Do you think was the political conservatism sort of that was happening on television reflecting the conservatism of the time that was right across the whole culture? Or was television always a sort of a very easy target for politicians?
Well, I think that there's a lot of cooperation in American broadcasting between conservative regimes and the people who own the broadcast machinery and all the rest of the news machinery too.
So,
because what Ronald Reagan would be doing every year on January the 1st. It would be a special party at that Annenberg estate in Palm Springs. They'd get together and plan what they were going to do with the media for the following year.
So, is broadcast television, say now, does it reflect contemporary America, or is only one sort of strata of it, the sort of establishment strata?
I think that it's the closest you would get to something really reflecting actual behavior and actual attitudes is what happens on Fox on Thursday night. I mean, whether you like it or not, Fox has shows which have a little bit more of a contemporary, realistic feel than what's on the other channels.
And Fox is the sort of as the pirate out the side there.
Well, the big boys didn't like Fox. They didn't welcome the existence of a so-called fourth network. It's not really a network yet, but they didn't want any competition.
One example of a Fox show is Married with Children.
It's a very successful show. So The Simpsons, Living Color. And the other thing that is very successful is that Beverly Hills 91012 or whatever it is.
And is it, so, the audiences that American television gets, does it go for a broad audience right across the spectrum, or does it go for a more different segments, like you get the Beverly Hills show? That's obviously aimed for kids. Is that accessible to all kids, or is it mainly sort of white middle class upper kids? How do they sort of?
They don't tell me what goes on in the story meetings, but I would imagine that it's mostly for the white kids.
So is it sort
But on the other hand, my kids watch Living Color. I watch Living Color. I think it's a funny show.
What's, say, a show like Married with Children, what does middle America think of a show like that? Is it threatening, or is it
threatening to them? No, I think they like it. I think they look at the Bundy character in there and go, yeah, I know a few Bundys myself. But the interesting thing about Bundy-like characters in all sitcoms, the universal rule of all sitcoms is fathers are weak, fathers are bad, mothers are wise. Now, this has been with us since the 50s. And this has sent a very bad psychological message to the entire society. It has made fatherhood almost a criminal activity. And a lot of people would be dissuaded from ever becoming a dad based on the images that are presented to the public from American television shows. And this goes all over the world. And you know what? American dads lived up to the image. They eventually became just as stupid and ineffectual as there's plenty of real Bundys out there. That's the reason why that show resonates. But there are real Bundys out there because there were many predecessors to the Bundy character.
So you think it was very much it's life following art, not art capturing the reality of the American family?
I think that it's a loop. It seems to me that in the United States, the family has been replaced by the squadron. If you look at MTV and the way the dances are set up, young people group together in squadrons. You know, especially the Janet Jackson Rhythm Nation video. It's squadronism. If you live in a place where you happen to be in a socially retarded area and they don't have gangs there yet, well, you know, you've got something that is like a little squad of guys. They have terms like me and my crew. You know, nobody's got a family because who wants to hang out with a dad? Dads are like Bundys. And if the dad does exist, the person who actually caused the child to appear someplace, well, he didn't think it was very much fun, so he left this little creature with the mother, and he went out to do something more interesting, and so therefore the squadron. And MTV is showing us the new family unit. Then again, if you live in a neighborhood where they don't have gangs, your other options are you belong to the football team, which is another kind of a gang, or you belong to some other thing which is not a family.
And do you think this is different than, hasn't always happened with with baseball teams or with social clubs, or just this thing it's coming to a younger age group now? How does the MTV thing focus it? Does it just make it much more tighter pressure on the kids to actually...
I don't think MTV puts pressure on them to abandon the family. I just don't think that there are any families left. I mean, that's obviously an exaggeration, but the family is an endangered species in this country. And the idea of how a family ought to work or a reason for it to even exist, to the point now where the United States government is talking about governmental programs almost to mandate family existence. Is that pathetic or what? And then they talk about family-oriented shows where people would kind of wish there was such a thing as a family, because you can sell a lot of interesting things to a family as a unit. Families that are units are interesting, have interesting consumer possibilities. I think there's a nostalgia for families as an institution, but they're rapidly fading away. And what MTV is doing is just portraying the destruction, not causing the destruction. But it's certainly, the way I look at it, I see evidence in the staging of those videos that it's all about wild kids in the street roaming in packs, huddling together for protection against the hostile outside world. That's the subtext of a lot of it.
And then along comes the family network. Where does that fit in? What sort of gaps that trying to fill in?
Well, I think that the whole idea of the family network is just a front for the religious broadcasting. They put on shows like The Flying Nun and The Talking Horse and stupid shit like that. And then when you're not looking, here comes Pat Robertson with yet another telethon telling people to pray to save America from homosexuals. And that's the family channel.
So you think as the family disintegrating, you're getting these other sort of organizations trying to sort of cash in,
replace the
on
family. You have a group of people who would cash in. They are gang leaders. Plenty of people to work in the gang and carry the drugs and do the business because somebody wants to belong to that. Then you've got religious opportunists who will feed upon this desperation that's out there in the countryside right now. If you can't have a real family, come to our church, and we will provide family-type things for you, and at a modest charge, of course. All it takes is all of your money and a piece of your mind, or maybe all of your mind and a piece of your money, but it's going to cost you.
I was in the bank today. There's signs that, you know, welcome from, you know, Christmas greetings from our family to your family.
Mm-hmm.
The restaurants talk about, you know, join the McDonald's family.
Exactly. The family has become a nostalgia word.
Mm.
Tree will be like that one day.
Family tree.
Mm-hmm.
Because America's built on the family. That's the whole, you know, middle America. It's mum, apple pie, the family, all those sort of values. That's part of the mythology and part of the
It may exist in Middle America. There may be pockets of resistance, but not in this town.
What about sort of the side of American television, which we see also the antiseptic, the Cosby shows, where you have these smiling.
What I want to know is, this show has been rated so highly for eternity, and I don't know anybody who ever watched it. I mean, somebody must have, but I can't imagine that the huge numbers that the advertisers were accepting as reality and therefore paying large dollars to put minutes on that program. I can't really see that those numbers were ever based on reality.
Do you think those sort of shows capture sort of, are they sort of like a mythology? Because they have these happy families and every, you know, Ray Charles comes for dinner and things like that. Do you think that's part of a mythology rather than a reality, is it?
I think that it's part of a maintenance program, a government approved, not sponsored, but certainly approved status quo maintenance program.
What about, you know, we don't see, but you might know, what the sort of shows that are made but never get onto air? You know, there must be things that have been...
Look at these shelves.
Because this television have to be seen as a thing that goes to everybody. This is the problem with the broadcast medium.
Well, the problem with that concept is that the image of the everybody that they plan for is such a work of fiction. And I can't imagine how they concocted this imaginary everybody. Some very sick people dreamed up this particular everybody because we could work backwards from the programming and deduce what the mentality of this imaginary everybody is like. And he would be one sick bastard, a total basket case, incapable of being a functional member of any society. You just look at the programming and, you know, deduce backwards from the images that you see on the air. Who did they plan this for? And what could that denizen be?
So, I suppose then looking at, say, narrowcasting, then when the cable came along, was narrowcasting and the cable thing seen as a way to sort of get to all those different sort of audiences rather than this one big, large audience? Was that the sort of reason the cable thing happened? Because...
No, I think cable basically was constructed not so they could narrowcast, but so they could have a specialized dumping ground for motion picture product, because that's really the bulk of cable business. Recycled Hollywood product. And that's what the home video business has turned into. I mean, you think what that originally started out, you could get any kind of programming on tape. It didn't have to be a movie. There were all kinds of documentaries and everything. But the documentary makers and the companies that distribute the documentaries have virtually been squeezed out of the business, because the majors go to the video retailers and say, "If you want the product, we don't want you to stock this stuff. We want more space on the shelf for Terminator 2. And just look at the numbers of the people just a few years ago who were doing non-theatrical home video programming. It's maybe 10 times what is left today. They've all been driven out.
Only Jane Fonda's workouts left on the shelves.
Yeah.
So, well, with cable, but now you're starting to see the narrow casting of, like, the religious programs, or there's sports and there's, can you talk about that? How it sort of
how it gets on the air?
How it's segmenting up, how the marketplace is segmenting, how the culture is sort of only looking at things that it believes in. If you're a sports fan, you can only just watch sports and you don't have to expose yourself to anything else.
Well, I think that if you're a sports fan, that is what you want. That's what will make you happy, and entertainment is supposed to be good for you. And so if you want sports, then go for it. I don't watch it. But for the people who like it, they should have as much as they want. And the same thing for religion. You should have just as much religion as you want. Music, have that. But there are other things that you ought to be able to have access to, and they're not there.
What sort of things?
Well, the only good science shows that you get to see are on PBS. And they're few and far between. And these are watered down by sort of nature shows where look at the bunny, or here comes the wolf, or look, there goes the tiger, and here comes the gazelle. There's a lot of those filler type pseudo nature shows that are on several different channels. There's some really good ones, where you see intimate behavior of ants and stuff. There's always exceptions, but I think that given the educational needs of this country in particular, that more of that in-depth scientific programming of an entertaining nature ought to be in more places rather than just in a specialized place.
So to get a program like that, of course, you'd have to nearly be subversive, because the sports fan wouldn't want to watch any of that. But if you wanted to get
But the sports fans got ESPN, so let them watch it. But I mean, for people who might want to see something else, or could be induced to be interested in something else, it should be available for them.
So do you consider yourself well serviced with the service that the broadcast and the cable company gives you?
But I don't think that it's worth the money I spend on it. And the biggest waste of money is the satellite dish. Because if you get the dish, you have access to all kinds of programming that's in the sky. But all the stuff that you would normally get on cable, which are pay services, you still have to pay for them from the satellite. It's all scrambled. And the only thing you get for free from a satellite is masses of very, very badly produced religious programming, home shopping networks, old movies. We can pick up sporting events from the Caribbean for some reason off of our dish. Just odd stuff, but you don't, unless you're going to pay, you don't get CNN or headline news or HBO or any of the other kind of stuff. And so to think that the future lies in the dish and you'll just set the dish up and the sky is yours, it's not. And the only advantage to the dish reception is it seems to have a better picture quality once you've unscrambled it and paid the money and looked at it. The downside is it takes far more time to switch between channels because you have to tilt the dish and aim the dish and all this stuff. And so cable is a mind-numbing convenience here. We have maybe 50 channels. I've never stopped to count them, a lot. And you can just zip through them and find something that'll occupy your mind for a while.
As a cable watcher, do you have the 3 or 4 channels that you always watch and you never access at all the other 46 or 47, or do you just graze across them?
Well, the ones that are set up on my instant, the primary buttons on my clicker are C-SPAN 1 and C-SPAN 2, CNN, and headline news.
So you're a real information junkie.
Yeah, I think that that's probably the most useful thing, useful service that cable can provide in this country, is having an inside look at the government, which is what C-SPAN gives you. And then the rest of the channels, just whiz right through. And if you want a movie, I've got 4 different channels that'll show me movies. We've got MTV. We receive all the sports stuff, but I took it off of the menu. I don't even want to waste my time looking at guys jumping around in shorts, throwing balls, into things. And
let's talk about then MTV, because that's just sort of having a major impact internationally. What's happening is a lot of, like in Germany, the local music shows are all collapsing. So the local music isn't getting exposure because the kids are all just watching this highly packaged clips that are coming in.
mm-hmm.
What's your opinions on the MTV? Because also, of course, it is giving access and getting music, and the visual side of music, which has always been neglected out there, is putting.
Well, I don't think that it's so bad that the visual side of music has been neglected. The overcompensation that you find on MTV right now is they've gone so much in favor of the visual that the music has been neglected. Basically, it's models lip syncing to freeze-dried drum tracks and tambourines and hand claps and mumbling. And it's not about music. It's about candy bars, pimple cream, cars, beer, chewing gum, teen products interspersed with a very uniform kind of rhythm track and people dancing around and wearing unusual clothes, and it's consumer manipulation.
What are the kids, how do they handle MTV? Is it still a big buzz? Is it still a unique thing, or is it sort of just another?
Around here, it's pretty much ho-hum. I mean, MTV has its major impact within the first year of it appearing in a locality. It goes on to the cable service, and people just watch it until they go blind. And then after a while, they realize it's all the same, and then it's ho-hum. So as it's added, I think that's the major impact is within the first year.
Is it affecting, live music venues and gigs and things like that, or is it, probably in a city like this, which is Music City, maybe not, but what do you think about out there in the heartland? Is it?
Well, the easiest way to promote a tour is to make a deal with MTV, and they'll promote your tour on the air, but of course they want to take a percentage of your tour. So it's a racket.
It's another business. It's a business. Yeah. So, in general terms, where do you see a future then of American television? If you have a cable system, or you have 50 cables, maybe one day someone will run another conduit up the road here, and you might have 150. Will that make a difference to
No.
you and your neighbours, how people live their lives? You think, or is it just more? Does more choice necessarily mean better programming?
Not in this country. I mean, more choice means more of the same. Because the minute somebody comes up with something which is successful, the natural instinct of the American is to imitate it and just clone it and beat it to death. Just as the thing I find very ironic in today's political world is that we're always talking in U.S. politics about how the Japanese never really invent anything, they just copy our stuff. Well, we just copy our stuff. We're chasing our tail here. CNN ran a statistic just a little while ago that for this quarter, the industrial growth figure for the industrial base of this country is at 50.1. It's virtually at a standstill. We're like 0.1 over no growth, just standing still. We're not even treading water. We're standing still. And I think that the timidity of the broadcasting and the absence of anything creative coming onto general broadcasting and the desire to feed bland product to an imaginary Mr. Everybody that they've calculated is out there is a sign of the times. It's people behave that way when they're scared to death. And so the only thing that I could say to people in other countries who have the opportunity to import American television shows to enliven their market, you do so at your own peril, because these shows that we watch are one of the reasons why we are the way we are. These shows help to make us the scared, ineffectual, bumbling, coarse society that we are. Now, you may want to watch these things. You might think that Dallas and MTV is something really good to have in your country, but at your own peril. The content it's embarrassing.
Do you think American news is good? Network news is good? They've got all the money. They've got every helicopter, live eyes vans. They've got the
Well, here's what they do with the helicopters. They'll deploy every one of them to hover over the house where Sean Penn and Madonna are going to get married. That's what they do with their helicopters. The war really took a lot out of them, this Gulf War, because CNN was on the case. They had all the hookups. They'd made all the deals. They were ready to be an assistant to the United States government. And the big guys, the network guys, had already done major cuts in their news departments. And they had to hire extra people at a premium price. They had to spend big bucks to get out there and get the story. And then each network tried to outdo each other with supposed military experts to explain the war to you day after day, plus the very expensive multicolor computer graphics that were involved, then the cartoon versions of missile launches and bomb strikes and tank positions in the desert. Did you ever see what the war was on U.S. television? I have a nice collection over there. You could look at the Gulf War a la U.S. television and you'd think you were in Disneyland. It was unbelievable. CBS expanded its news, its nightly news, to an hour to encompass the war. But since they had all this news blackout over there, what do you fill an hour with? You know, guys talking about what might happen, if this, if that. You know, it was just speculative drivel.
This wear is the result of just 3 hours in the air. Maintenance must be constant. In just minutes, a helicopter can be covered with sand.
Do you know about the CBS news story on the Pulsa de Nora?
No.
Okay. They ran a piece about Orthodox Jews in Israel putting a curse on Saddam Hussein.
Right.
It's a special curse called the Pulsa de Nora. And it may be on this roll. It's an unbelievable story. 10 righteous Jews have to go into a cave, and then they pray that Saddam Hussein dies in 2 weeks. And the way the story is handled, they say that, you know, they don't do this very often, but the last time they did it, the mayor of Jerusalem got killed because he wanted to, this is it, he wanted to open up a co-ed swimming pool.
Like all wars in the Middle East, the Gulf conflict has Christians, Muslims, and Jews all involving and invoking the name of God. And as Tom Fenton reports tonight, some groups are trying to wage spiritual warfare with unconventional weapons.
The Pulsa de Nora requires careful handling.
If some of this sounds unbelievable, you have to realize that these people live in a world of their own.
But in Israel's time of crisis, they are rallying round the colors. The day before the war began, they held a pray-in at the Wailing Wall for both peace and rain. It was a full-court press. They were 50% successful. Israel has since gotten rain. The Kabbalists who put the curse on Saddam hoped for 100% success. But if Saddam survives the deadline, they're prepared. If this doesn't work, Rabbi Scheinberger says, we have another plan to put an even bigger curse on him. Next time, they'll up the power tenfold. 100 righteous Jews will fire off a super Pulsa de Nora. That should get him even in his bunker. Tom Fenton, CBS News, Jerusalem.
And so goes the war and the world tonight. Coming up at 8 o'clock, 7 Central and Mountain on this station, 48 hours.
What?
Right?
Yeah, so television very much does feed on itself in that sort of way, doesn't it? It sort of it
Yeah.
invents its own reality.
Well, it has to, because it's not easy to fill up 24 hours a day with stuff 7 days a week and multiply that by 50 channels. You are going to run a little thin every once in a while, aren't you?
Yeah. Okay. So, what would you think then? In a foreign countries, people's impression of America must be then if they see this American product, which is out there and is selling pretty well around the world.
Well, let me give you one example. I was in Moscow at the Gosteleradio's studios, and in every office they had a little television set, and in every office CNN headline news was on. The sound was off. Everybody was looking at the pictures. This news flash comes on that in East Germany, the people had just rushed in and taken over the secret police headquarters and were swarming into the street with bottles of champagne and dossiers of this, and they just kicked over the KGB. The Russians were looking at this like, what do you make of this? They had no idea what it was. And then this little 1-minute story is then followed by the Hollywood Minute. You ask, how do people in other countries imagine Americans based on our broadcasting? You tell me. What would you think?
So there's no reality there at all.
The reality is invented for you by people who choreograph it. There's got to be an office in Washington someplace where a bunch of people that you never heard of choreograph reality. It's not just what the next photo op is going to be. It's what is the interpretation of a given international event. And this has to be generally dispensed through the media with no questions asked.
You know, do you think that, you know, because of these problems of television, people are going to start watching less television because they're going to sort of see through this sort of facade, or is it so addictive in its sort of packaging that, you know, people are going to need more and more of this rather candy floss blandness?
I can see both trends happening. I think that there has been a drop-off in viewership to network television as more people hooked up to cable. And the networks, I'm sure, would admit this, that they've lost business just because cable has more of what people would like to see. Whether people will stop watching television and go to something else, I don't think so. One of the reasons why that's not going to be true in Los Angeles is as it becomes more and more dangerous and more expensive to leave your house for entertainment, you almost by default wind up having a family unit and family nights at home because it's scary to get in your car, in California, get in your car and drive someplace and go to a movie or go to dinner or something because you could get killed. It's weird out there. So it's safer at home. That's one of the reasons why video stores do a good business. You know, you look around so nobody's going to do a drive-by shooting. You go in, you get your video, and then go home and pretend you went to the movies.
So it is following some sort of function. Maybe it's going to be bringing the family back together.
If there's any family left, I mean, in order to have a family, all your younger children have to go out and sell crack in order to support everybody else.
What do you personally get out of television? Because you are very interested in the medium, and you look at what personally do you get out of it? Why do you have a television set in your house?
Because I'm an amateur sociologist, and if you can read the images and you can like make decisions about how things are going by what color stuff is, how the shot is framed, what topics are covered in the news, what sort of images, what stereotypes appear in the characters who inhabit the commercials. Because they're not just selling you the product, they are selling you the lifestyle in which the product functions. Because a lot of the stuff they're selling you has no earthly use. And so you have to create this imaginary world in which the product must be consumed. And so looking at the images that are manufactured of the people who desire to use product X, it's telling you something about the mindset, first of all, of Madison Avenue, secondly, of the broadcasters, and also of the government, because none of this would get on the air if the FCC didn't approve of it. And if it stays on the air, that means somebody is buying the product, and that tells you something about the people that they've designed this pitch for.
So it's very much like a window. They say that television being a window on society, it's not so much that the camera becomes the window, but actually the packaging is the window.
If you learn how to read it. Because the news isn't just the story. It's how often they repeat the story, what the tone of voice is that is used to set up the story, how the story is actually photographed, whether or not, in CNN's case, whether or not they bring on a so-called expert to explain the story to you. And CNN also has this infotainment kind of thing where on the weekends they have groups of journalists or pseudo-journalists or representatives of think tanks or research institutes or whatever, and they're all right-wing, and they all get on there and they all chew the fat on the weekend, and it's just another way of reinterpreting whatever happened during the week. Now, I don't know whether that kind of stuff makes it to the international market, but it's a staple diet of weekend CNN here.
So the programs that interest you most, you use television mainly as a source of hard information and also a source of sort of that snapshot on what's the society's going on, who's pulling the strings.
Yeah. I also watch mind-numbing entertainment too. I mean, occasionally there'll be a film on HBO or Movie Channel that I'm interested in, and I'll watch it. You know, some of the recent blockbuster films, like the other night we watched this rather amusing piece of shit called Predator 2. I don't know whether you've seen that.
Now you've got to tell us about one show. We're going to go and shoot The Young and the Restless.
The soaps are something that I'm not familiar with because they run them during the day and I'm working. So I have on 2 occasions left tapes running so that I could look at it just to see what it was. And it's a pretty strange message. I think that you'll be inspired by what you find.
Do you think it's
Because the Mr. Everybody that they're dealing with there is not a Mr. Everybody, it's a Mrs. Everybody or a Ms. Everybody. And the calculations that they've made in the story meetings to put these things together about what these special people are interested in, what are their secret desires, and what will keep their attention long enough that you can sell them stuff. The subtext of all of the soap operas are really pretty disturbing.
Is it sort of Ken and Barbie moving and talking? Is it that sort of...
No, there's a lot of bad sex and betrayal and just turgid flux, I think would be the best way to describe it.
Sports.
If you really want to appreciate American sports, there are several things you have to see. The World Wrestling Federation, the American Gladiators, and the shows that come on after the wrestling matches on the Wrestling Channel where they interview the wrestlers, and the sponsors in between for these health food bulk up health drink things for people who wish they were bodybuilders. That's pretty interesting stuff. A lot of politics in there.
In many ways, you look at these programs...
Oh, and there's another show called Rock and Roller Games. It comes on the Orange County Channel, and during the Gulf War, they had put up a logo that said, "This is the War Channel." And the brilliant idea behind that was they took roller derby, which is an old concept, and crossed it with rock and roll and crossed it with international politics. So the bad team had Arabic-sounding names or ethnic-sounding names and people of color, and the winning team was called the Patriots. And they had girls dressed in pink and a lot of blonde-haired people. And the ethnic team would always do dirty tricks to them, but the Patriots would always win. And then the show would end with some burnout rock star kind of character, not even a rock star, but a rock star-like character with a handheld microphone prancing through the audience, singing to a pre-recorded backup track in a kind of a 1970s musical style, trying to get the audience to clap along with it. I actually taped one of these shows. It was horrific.
Sounds like a collector's item, that one.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Except it's dangerous.
Well, all the wrestling that I've seen, all this highly packaged wrestling, deals in ethnic stereotypes, and for people who have the type of mindset where they would almost believe in wrestling, and the audiences for these kinds of shows is pretty young, it just reinforces racial and ethnic hatred.